Hello friends, welcome to this tutorial. We will cover method references in Java 8 in this tutorial. So objective of this tutorial is that after you are through with this tutorial, you should be able to understand what are method references in Java, what are the four different kinds of method references, and finally you should also be comfortable in using method reference in your code. So what are we going to cover? We are going to cover what is method reference and where you can use them, what are the different types of method references, few points to remember. Then I will be showing you few practical examples of method references and provide you the source code of the examples I'm going to use in this session. Okay, so let's get started. So what's method reference? Method references are shorthand notation for lambda expressions. So as you might have seen in my previous tutorial, lambda expressions are a way to express anonymous classes in a very short notation, right? So method references are further shortening up of lambda expressions in a particular scenario. We will discuss what is that scenario when you can use method references to replace lambda expressions. But before that, you should know that the method reference can only be assigned to functional interface, just like you can do that in lambda expression. That means wherever you are using lambda expression, usually the target should be assigned to functional interface, right? Similarly, method references also should be referenced to or should be assigned to functional interfaces. And in case you're wondering what a functional interface, you can go through my previous tutorial in the Java 8 series. So the way to use a method reference is using two colons, as you can see in the beginning of this line, between the class name and the method name. So that is how you use method reference. Okay, so for example, the way you will write is the name of the class or instance reference of a class followed by two colons followed by name of the method you are referencing. Okay, for example, if you are referencing a static method called getAge in a class called person, so we will say person colon colon getAge. So that is how the syntax works for method reference. So when can you use a method reference? So there are scenarios wherein you're just picking an object and directly passing it to a method in lambda expressions. So in those kind of scenarios, you can replace that call with method references because that makes it easier to understand and in a short syntax. Okay, for example, if I'm sending this p element or p object, and this is the lambda separator to println method and just passing it so that it can be printed. So this is kind of pass through example. So I'm picking it and passing it to this method, right? So in these kind of scenarios, what you can do is you can say that I want to reference the println method. So I'll say system.out.println. Okay, so Java will understand from the context that this method reference is actually trying to take the p element and pass it to the println method, and whatever is being done in the println method, which is like printing to the console, will be done here also. So once you see some examples, it will be more clear to you. What are types of method references? So there are four types. One is static method, then instance method, then instance method of object of arbitrary type, and constructor method reference. Okay, so we will see some examples of each of these kinds, and in that scenario, and after that it will be clear to you what are these different types of method references. But for your reference, just to touch it, static method reference means whenever you call a method on a static class, that is static method reference. When you invoke a method on an instance of a class, that is instance method reference. When you invoke a method reference on an instance of a type of class, okay, which is of the target type, that is called instance method of or object of arbitrary type. So this is little bit difficult to understand unless you see some examples. So when you see the examples, it will be more clear. So I'll not take it further at this point, but we will see examples in the next tutorial. Then finally, the last one is constructor method reference, which is just trying to create objects using the constructor. We will see that also in the next tutorial. So there are few things you need to remember. So since the method reference actually is a short form of lambda expression, so you should be aware of which lambda expression you are converting to method reference. So that is first point. And the second point is all method references are assigned to functional interfaces. So you should also have knowledge of functional interfaces, and for that you can refer to one of my previous tutorial in this series. Now let's see some practical examples of static and instance method references in this tutorial, and the last two will be covered in the next tutorial. Now we will see some practical examples of method references. We will start with static method reference first. So I'll just create a class, new class. I'll just name it static method reference example 1. I'm going to use public static void main. Now what we'll do is we'll create a list of persons. I'm going to import it, and so this is a utility class which I have created earlier, and I have also used it in previous tutorials. You can see the code in the GitHub repository which I have created, and the link is there at the end of this video. Now I want to go through each person and print them, right? So I'll say for each. So the parameter of this for each is a consumer interface, and since I'm using person list, so it will take it will be consumer of person. Okay, so how does the consumer interface behave? Okay, so the way it behaves is it is represented with this kind of symbol, which is like one input object is there, and there will be a method name which is usually called the accept method, and it takes the object and works on the object. Okay, so let's see how to write that. So what you can do is you can say new consumer and also person, and let's write the anonymous implementation. So I'll say public void accept person, and I'll do something with the person object. Okay, so I've imported them. So if you look at this, what happens is there is only one method which is called accept, which takes a object as input, and then it doesn't returns anything. Okay, so if you want to know more about consumer interface, you can go through my previous tutorial. So we will write one more method here. We'll say public static void print person, and it takes a person object and it just prints it. Okay, that's all. Let's make it perfect. So what we can do is we can replace, as you can see, this method also has object as input, doesn't returns anything, and it works on the object, right? So it's a kind of similar signature as the accept method. Okay, or like this, like this. So we can just assign a functional interface of consumer to this method. So we will say P, which is each person, let's say, and I'll say like this. So this is our static method. So I'll say this class dot print person and P. Okay, so I'll just remove this and like this. So this is our lambda expression for calling this method, right? So I'll run it and see. As you can see, it printed all the persons. There are 6 persons here, which is a ready-made list I've created from the utility class, and it is printing all of those. Now, how do I create a method reference? So this is a static class and static method, and if you look at this, I'm taking an element and just taking it and passing it to this print person method. So it's kind of a pass through. Okay, just take it, and same thing, I'm just handing it over to this method. So this is a perfect scenario for method reference. So what I'll do is, to create a method reference from a lambda expression, you have to remove the parameter list on the left hand side. So I'll remove this, and since the parameter list is gone, I don't need the separator. So I remove this, and this is also inferred now. Okay, because this is the input, so I can simply say colon colon print person and name of the method. So that's all. So that's how it is created. Now I'll just run it and see. So, as you can see, it is still able to print it. Now is instead of lambda expression, it is using method reference. And what kind of method reference? It's a static method, so it is a static method reference. As you can see, this is also not needed. I can remove this. So we have shortened the lambda expression using method reference. So that is one simple example of using method reference for static methods. Now I'll create one more example and we will see further. Okay, so this one we created using a consumer interface. Now we will use a supply interface and see how to create it. So I'll copy this and paste it here, and this is example 2. Let's open this. So supply interface, now I will use a user object as input, sorry, as the output, and this is also static, and I'll say create user, and I'll create a user object. This is the ID of the user and name of the user. Let's say, well, now I'll write my name here and I'll return this user object. So this is a very simple method. Okay, now I'll be using supply interface. So how does the supply interface look like? So supply interface has a signature of this kind of, so you'll say blank parameter as the input, and you will give a method name. Okay, so this method name is what is going to create a supplier interface. Okay, so supply interface, if you remember or recall, is used for supplying instances of objects. So I have covered supplier interface in detail in a previous tutorial, and you can go through that in the Java 8 series and find out more in case you're not comfortable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these, So supply interface takes blank parameter and assigns it to a method which creates a supply object. It doesn't take any input, and to get back the object, actual object, you have to invoke the get method. Okay, so that's so since we want to supply user objects, so we'll say like this. We'll say supplier of user, and we'll say user supplier. Okay, equals to, and this is the lambda expression. Then you will say dot. Okay, I had to import it. Now I'll say create user. Okay, so this is the lambda expression which represents the supply interface. Why? Because as you can see, this guy doesn't takes any input, so this method also does not takes anything, and it returns some kind of object. So what kind of object? User. So since it is returning user object, so it can be assigned to supplier interface. So now I want to print it. So I'll say sys out and user supplier dot get. So get is the abstract method in the supplier interface. Okay, so that is how you have to create a lambda expression for supplier interface. We'll run it. As you can see, it's able to print the user object. Now I want to convert this to a method reference. So this is a static method reference to this class. So again we will repeat the same process. We will remove the parameter on the left hand side, and since I don't have the left hand side, I don't need the separator, right? And now I can say colon colon, and I don't need the parenthesis here also. So this is the method reference equivalent of the lambda expression for supplier interface. Now we can run it again and see. So as you can see, it still prints it back. So we are just simply saying that, okay, I want to invoke the create user method in the this class, this static create user static method in this class, right? So this is a very simple example of static method reference. So what I'll do is I'll use these same objects to see example of instance method instead of static method, right? So I'll say copy this, and I have a instance method reference example class. So now I can reuse this code. So I'll just remove this. So as soon as I remove this, what does it become? This becomes an instance method, right? So I can create an instance of this class now. So I will create an instance, and now instead of the static reference, I will call it, invoke it on the instance of this. Okay, so that is the only change we have to do. So we'll run it and see. As you can see, it can print all the person's name in the similar fashion. Only thing is, instead of calling at the static context, we are invoking it on the instance, right? So that is a simple example of instance method reference. Okay, so we can use the same one and create a example of instance invocation of method reference on the supplier interface. I'll copy this. Now let's open it and see. So again I will remove the static method, static declaration. Then I'll create the instance of this class. And create new object of this, and here we can simply say ex2, right? So that's all. Now we can run it and see. As you can see, this is also behaving in the same manner. Only difference is we are invoking the method reference on an instance. So one more thing before I finish this off. So here we are using this method to print it. So let's try another way. We'll say person dot for each, and for each person print it. So I'll say system dot out dot print ln, and we'll say p. So this is the lambda expression for printing each person, right? So here also we can see we are taking each person and passing it to println, which is an instance method of out object. Okay, so since we are just taking the object and passing it as a kind of pass through, we can convert it to method reference. So I'll remove this. Since I remove the parameter, I don't need the separator also, and I'll just call it println, and I remove this. Okay, so we can see if it works or not. As you can see, it still works. Yeah, it prints all of them. So that's all I have for today. So here is the source code location. You can go to the GitHub and into the free tip central directory and download the examples, and you can practice them, because I will emphasize that practice is very important. Okay, otherwise you will forget it and you will not be able to understand it fully. So guys, that is all in this tutorial. I hope you liked it and found it useful. Please subscribe to my channel and provide your inputs in the comment section, and please like my video. Thank you and see you soon in the next tutorial. Bye bye.